Good morning, Mr. Jinnah.
Good morning, Dr. Saab. Good morning.
How are you?
Oh, fine.
Well, I welcome you. I welcome you in this workshop, the joint workshop of NIDM and OSDM.
Thank you, Professor Saab. I think we will now hold a series of joint webinar. We will start little unconventional subjects now, because conventional subject a lot of people are working on. So let us start webinars on some unconventional subjects.
I am with you totally.
Yeah. Because and particularly, now that the mitigation fund has been created, now there is a lot of lack of understanding as well as capacity problem in utilizing this mitigation fund. So that is something to, and 2 days back there was a WhatsApp basically on where I think your staffs were also there. That is with that FCC project which is being conceived for 3 states, a pilot. So there I have given a little bit of input from my side because I was having some other problems. So that is basically whenever any agency or any fund is available to support the governments at any state, let us not worry about doing the hardcore things because SDMF and SDRF anyway, a lot of fund is now available. So basically, objective is any additional funding or additional support if we are getting, that should be utilized to create capacities within various government departments to promote disaster leadership in various different sectors and help them to mainstream their concepts in their departments. That should be now the biggest thing which SDMs across the country, all SDMs.
Very true. And now I don't know about the litigation status in Odisha and other states. Whether any things also moving to the court, because largely it is after the deaths and every fire thing, only insurance companies bothered about because they are having this compensation to be paid. But I don't know the litigation status on the fire, how much it is getting relief from the court or.
Yeah. But no, there are many issues in this also. Gradually, this mitigation aspect. See what happened. The simple logic why governments have so far not been very mitigation oriented. Governments are always response oriented because that gives them
Response oriented.
the visibility. That is the most important thing because governments, when it is always a political government, and they will decide in what way we should work. And because response of visibility, so the agencies, government agencies work very seriously in response phase. Since mitigation doesn't give that visibility, so that is a little weak. We need to now change culture in governments.
Your voice is breaking. It is not coming.
Okay. No problem. What is the problem? Is it audible now? No. Yeah. Look, what I was saying, this in mitigation, we need to change the culture of thinking about mitigation in governments. That is the crucial thing. And thankfully, this new guidelines which Government of India is thinking, we should utilize these guidelines to push thinking about mitigation in various departments. That is the thing. So the culture of mitigation needs to be built into the governance framework now.
Right.
185.
So now it's 11 o'clock. Clock has ticked up. So we can think of starting with the permission of Executive Director NIDA and also Additional Chief Secretary Mr. Pradeep Jaina.
Please, the Major General Staff is already there.
Thank you very much. I welcome Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal and welcome you and all the delegates who have joined. I see this Mr. Sachadit Mohanty, Dr. Mohanty. He is the Director General of Fire. And then we have Anup Karan from the World Bank. Then we have Mr. Prabhat Rahane, Chief Fire Officer from Mumbai. Then Mr. I see Mr. Dastur from Gujarat. Are you there, Mr. Dastur? Then Mr. Sethi, Sukant Kumar Sethi, from Chief Fire Officer, Odisha. Then I see Mr. Vijayan and also the Executive Director of the OSDMA, Mr. Kamalochan Mishra. If we now the time has already ticked up 11:01 as per my clock, and we have got the permission to start. So, dear friends, this is a very, very important event, especially when it comes to the management of fire. And in the very informal discussion, I was just discussing with the Additional Chief Secretary of Odisha, who is in charge of the OSDM, is the CEO, and also been there long years in the disaster management, I can say, because he has served this United Nations along with the government of Odisha at the various capacity with the rural development, Panchayati Raj, so which say that there's a very, very kind of transacting different sectoral departments. And so I welcome you, Mr. Jena, for this particular event. I also welcome Mr. Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal, Executive Director of the National Institute of Disaster Management. Mr. Bindal has joined NIDM almost 1 year and 8 months ago. Almost, I'm saying. And he has been shaping this institute with his vision and his dedicated dedication and sincerity, and taken at a different level, and various topics which the collaborative partners which we are into with, and he himself is a very decorative officer as a Vishesh Seva Medal, and also worked in various disaster scenario in Gujarat and in Kashmir and many other places. I welcome you, Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal, for Executive Director in IDM for this particular very, very important event. I also welcome Dr. Mohanty, who is the Director General of the Fire Services Officer, the Director General of Fire Services Government of Odisha, who is here. And many all dignitaries, I will introduce them when I will invite them on the floor in detail. But important thing which I would like to flag here is we see that the fire has been a disaster as a kind of a exposure of risk due to this fire is 24/7 and all seasons, all weathers. So it's not a one disaster which is which might take 100 years or 50 years or 25 years or 10 years or after 1 year. So the periodicity, if you look at that kind of a experience which we have, we are struggling with different kind of a fire, and with the household fire, with their industrial fire, with their hospital fire, with their hotel fire, or for all installations, whether the rural fire and all. So what I'm saying is this, this kind of incidents which are happening, almost we say that a 24/7 basis exposure of this, of the fire is. So the idea is what Mr. Jena in the informal session which we were discussing, that how this fire could be taken into as a front seat of prevention. rather than keeping on the same kind of a track when the fire is happening and we are running around and responding to disaster because it is visible. So this is a kind of a classic orientation of the governance of disaster management, whether we should be focusing on the visible disasters, which are giving a kind of a lot of media cover, the kind of a challenges which we have, or the kind of a prevention and mitigation which can save larger lives. So how this kind of a paradigmical shift which can be brought in across the globe, we have been discussing with the Sendai framework. In India also, we have been talking about this paradigm shift. We brought the legislation, we brought the policy framework. Every state, like OSDM itself, is the oldest disaster management authority in the country. I remember when 99 cyclone took place, and I was part of the World Bank during that time, and I visited that Odisha, and we had Mr. Arvind Behra. That time he was joined as a first CEO, and we discussed that what kind of institution would be shaping place in the country, and that how this during the formative stage to now, how much the Odisha State Disaster Authority has evolved. So similarly, many the Gujarat State Disaster Authorities and finally got the place in the National Act, and then percolating down to the various states of the country. So this is very, very important to look at that what kind of innovations which we are making. So this kind of innovation is required very much in the management of fire. 2 points which I would like to highlight. That one is this 2,500 fire deaths are happening every year in the country. So one is the mortalities. When we talk about disaster, we always be concerned about, or normally we are concerned about the mortalities. So the life should be saved. That is one biggest challenge. So here the life is 2,500 is no less number every year when we are losing. So in a year, how many lives in a 10 years of time, if you talk about when the enactment of the Act 15 years now, how much life still we are losing every year. So this is to be looked into, that entire governance of fire management. The second is that who are those 2,500 people? Then we find that large number of women are dying in the fire, and more than 69% of women are facing this casualty, and then less. So this is another dimension. What we look into, that what kind of a mortality which are happening. When we go further, we might find that how many children and how. And largely fire, it has been observed by all the fire experts are here. So I will not deliberate upon the fire and all, but I'm just flagging these issues with why we are sitting today with the NIDM and also OSDM and discussing about this fire. So what we are saying is this in terms of this, how the damage is assessed after the fire, whether the damage is assessed by the governance or not, or whether it's a private sector or household or hospitals and all. So this is to be looked into, whether any exercise is done. And normally insurance company, they do, because they have to pay the compensation. So I will not go into the moral hazard and other thing and how it is fire is catching and how fire is shown. But larger deaths which are happening is due to smoke. So now the smoke is a real culprit when we say that how smoke and other things throughout the prevention of the disaster. Like Delhi fire happened, and I personally visited to that place, and I found that the kind of premises in which the entire small factories were going on, it is pathetic condition, and many that was just one example, but hundreds of that are there in across the country. Not to say that only it is happening in Delhi, but it's happening all over. So this is important, and we are here discussed to. Before I welcome all the distinguished participants, I would just like to flag this point that we are here to discuss that fire, what is the fire exposure, the risk exposure of fire, why we have not been able to address this issue as a prevention issue rather than focusing on response, how we can remove the deaths or casualty or reduce the impact. The fourth is that how we can think of measuring this is cascading impact, that one after another disaster which happens. And then also what we are talking about is this, how every individual or household are phased into the prevention rather than responding to such kind of a fire situation. So this is that point which we are going to discuss, and what are the technology today available which can help us in whether we have a same firefighting system which we had the fire tender system, or we need to graduate ourselves also while even responding to disaster. So today we will be focusing largely on the prevention part and risk management, and then later part we will be focusing on that response part, that how we are responding to disaster. Because in the country, since disaster management taken, we are tired of addressing these issues in terms of response. We have not been able to actually shift the governance focus on this prevention and mitigation. So how the same governance which is responding very nicely to disasters, how the same governance can take this as a priority. So for this, I would request Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal to give the introductory remarks, that how he feels as an head of the institution, and also his experience in the disaster management, especially in the armed forces, and understanding this issue to be taken further. So I request Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal, Executive Director of NIDM, for addressing the introductory remark. And I also welcome all the distinguished delegates who have joined as a participants or panelists in this particular event. Thank you very much, and over to Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal, Executive Director of the National Institute of Disaster.
Thank you, Professor Mohanty, Professor Santosh. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. I can hear.
Okay. So thank you very much for this particular introduction of the issue as such. And NIDM is very happy to collaborate with OSDMA on such an important issue. And I need to commend Shri Pradeep Jaina ji, IAS Additional Chief Secretary of Government of Odisha and MD of OSDMA. And also we welcome DG Fire Service Odisha, Shri Satyajit Mohanty, who has come to address this important webinar, and all the other dignitaries who will be giving their insights into this thing during the course of the day. And I also welcome all the participants who have joined, which is right now good about 280 or so, and more are joining. So it will be a great learning session. It will be a great dissemination session. It will be a great experience sharing session, and it will be a great problem solving or apprehension solving session. I'm very sure of that, because we are aware that fire poses a major threat to various occupancies in India. Almost every day, some fires are reported by media across the country. These fires not only result in the loss of many precious lives and injuries to many, but also inflict heavy property damage and loss. So during the last 2 decades, there was a vibrant growth in the construction activities in India, as we are all aware, especially high-rise buildings. And because of the peculiar nature, fire in the residential buildings in urban areas in particular, high-rise buildings, has become more complex, and the salvaging operations due to it have become more difficult, and sometimes even result in numerous deaths and huge property losses, which I'm sure the DG services will be touching upon at a later stage. So this rapid modernization of Indian industry has made the scenario more complex, and awareness towards the fire safety has not been forthcoming with this modernization and the increasing risk due to the fire. In fact, despite major fires, flagrant violations of building and fire safety norms continue. India saw at least 3 major fire accidents in 2019. The first in a 4-story Central Delhi hotel in February, which killed 17 people. The second at the coaching center in Surat in May, which killed 22 students. We have seen graphics of how the students were falling from the uh, floor and dying on their own because of trying to escape from the fire. And the third was again in the factory in Delhi, which Professor Santosh was alluding to, and he had gone there to visit that site also immediately after that, which resulted in death of 43 workers. So in the second and third instances, it was found that the buildings authorized to be residential complexes were operating as commercial buildings. So when the moment commercial building it becomes a commercial building, the load on electricity, the load on everything increases, for which it was not built for. So despite these major fires in the past, flagrant violations of these norms continue, and fire accidents take place with alarming severity. It is high time safety is taken seriously and violators are brought to book. Past incidents show that most fire accidents take place due to three major reasons. First is the electrical short circuit and gas cylinder oblique stove bursts. The second is human negligence. And third is ill-informed habits of like bidi, cigarette, not having the habit of switching on or switching off whenever the work is over. So they all need to be addressed together to make the buildings or any area safer from the fire point of angle. We haven't yet learned our lessons from the gruesome Upahar cinema fire, which killed 59 people and injured about 103 in the national capital in 1997. Not much has been done after that. Uh, in this 14 years that we're talking about, some places that are frequent victims are the temples, firecracker units in Kerala and Tamil Nadu, for example. They don't even come under the strict demographic definition of urban areas, but they still have fire incidents which are very major in nature, resulting losses in crores. The National Crime Records Bureau figures that has come out that talks about, I'm talking about old statistics, that 17,700 Indians died, out of which 48 people nearly every day due to fire accidents in 2015 alone, out of which approximately 62% were women. Maharashtra and Gujarat, which are two of the most highly urbanized states, account for 30% of the country's fire accident deaths. So there appears to be a close correlation between deaths due to fire-related accidents and population density associated with urbanization. So in cities after cities, towns after towns, villages after villages, year after year, we are getting killed and burned in fire accidents. So technically speaking, these are not accidents. These are man-made disasters manufactured by a mix of, I'll say, half-baked regulations, compromised enforcement machinery, and powerful interest groups. So these are actually planning made problems. These have been made due to our poor planning over the years. And we are also seeing that as the new cities are being built and old ones are expanding, the necessary features that make up for these urban spaces are not being taken care for here. Like fire safety is crucial. It is pivotal that fire safety should be one of the most topmost priorities across the country, especially in population dense urban areas such as Mumbai, Delhi, Bhubaneswar, Bangalore, Cuttack, and cities like that. So as cities become more and more crowded and the vertical growth is marked by buildings that continue to be in close corridor to each other, so any neglect leads to deadly calamities and it poses major challenges for the firefighters to take care of it. So the various issues which require to fire safety in context to India are poorly enforced regulations. I'll say majority of the buildings lack NOC from the fire department. Municipal corporations and local bodies are responsible for providing fire services in many states, but due to lack of resources, they are not able to do so. 65% deficiency is being reported in the fire stations as of a recent survey carried out. According to Ministry of Home Affairs, in 144 towns with a population of over 1 lakh, there is a huge deficiency of firefighting infrastructure. So the need to build up the firefighting capabilities is a must. Lack of unified fire services in most of the states is also gives rise to that there should be a unified fire service provided to provide all necessary guidelines and instructions in firefighting. Organization structure, modern equipment, their scaling, authorization, standardization, training on them, adequate funding, and unavailability of training institutions. Now we have fire stations which have training institutions, but they do not have the equipment to train on because that equipment is a live equipment, not kept separately for training. And if it is kept separately for training, most of the time it is not in a working condition because of the amount of training being carried out on it. So we require that resources, infrastructure facilities, public awareness is a major issue. The do's and don'ts, conduct of regular mock exercises, evacuation drills, the training of the electricians, who are most of the time responsible for doing patch-up jobs, which leads to short circuit and other issues. So there is a very important aspect that hazard identification and risk assessment needs to be carried out, so village by village, block by block, district by district, by a agency which is capable of doing so, and funds to be allocated. And today we are happy that Odisha government has seen it fit to conduct a webinar on fire safety for the population. That itself shows the commitment of the state government to do something about it. And I'm very hopeful that this webinar will be followed up with some guidelines coming up, some safety checks and balances being put in place, some audit being carried out in some areas, and appropriate funding and resource management will be follow-up of this whole exercise. Otherwise, it is going to be a waste. It will be just one another lectures being conducted as part of a training program. So by 2050, we are aware that almost 70% of the world population will live in cities. So we must uh, concentrate on the cities. And if we concentrate on the cities, automatically the level of fire, the number of deaths, the number of property losses will reduce. Otherwise, we will be walking unprepared into a deadly inferno in future. So with this opening remarks, I will rest my case for the timing, and I'm keen to listen to all the speakers who will be coming after me, because they are so learned and they're experts in their field. Thank you so much. Over to you, Professor Santosh.
Thank you very much, Major General Bindal, because the kind of thing which you have mentioned in terms of is a very, very futuristic in its approach. Population density vis-a-vis the kind of how the fire is spreading. And by actually highlighting this example of Upahar Cinema Coaching Center, the hotel and the residential complexes, and especially when we talk about this, the deficient in the response itself, one that we are talking about this, the governance of fire management, where we are focusing on prevention and mitigation. But even if we have been responding for so many years to fire, still there is a deficiency in 65% in all the fire. This is very, very revealing kind of to cope with the changing urban environment. And you said that we unified about the unified services. And these are the issues that how to be flagged, and whether this webinar will lead to a kind of a just a generic discussion, or it should lead to a kind of a very, very convincing document or the guidelines which we can, every state can start thinking of taking it further. Thank you very much once again, General Bindal, for being this as a very nice introductory remark to us upon. And this is the time when we are looking, we should be looking into the urban governance also along with it, with the fire. Many of states have a kind of a largely fire is controlled by the administration, and many of them have the state department directly. So this kind of, I don't know whether we should call it an ambiguity or we should call it a kind of a unified chain of command when we talk about an incident response system. So to that response mechanism, but the defining the system for prevention and mitigation. And Government of India's this project is also going on this strengthening of the firefighting services in the country for and leading to setting up of institution as well. Two things which I would highlight before give this give his address. One is this: we are talking about the governance, and in this governance, we are talking about what is the safety net given in the building bylaws, and the building bylaw, National Building Code, which talks in 2000, is talking about fire and life safety. So this is to be seen as a kind of a challenge. Also highlighted, General Bindal highlighted that the poor enforcement or this you said that population density our composition of nexus between different types of people into urban governance is actually hindering us for taking action. So I would request Mr. Jena, in this context, when we are talking about the fire management, and you are yourself is saying that challenge is how to make it a kind of a pre-disaster prevention event rather than just on focusing on the post-disaster response. And since you are also looking after currently OSDMA as a leading authority for the disaster response and also representing the government as additional chief secretary to the government of Odisha, and been before at the many responsible position. You have yourself has been seeing that how at the local level, at the district level, things are getting reinforced, and what kind of a changes are required for the future, and the billions of dollars are being spent by the various governments along with the national government in urban or safe city in the times to come. So I would welcome and request you to kindly address Shri Pradeep Jena, Additional Secretary of Government of Odisha.
Thank you, Professor Santosh Kumar. I must thank Major General Bindal Saab and Professor Santosh Kumar to have agreed to our request to have this webinar jointly organized. I'm happy that Dr. Satyajit Mohanty, IPS DG Fire Service, Odisha is here. In fact, both of us had been together as Collector and SP during the super cyclone in '99 in Cuttack. So together we have worked, and we know how difficult it is to work during disasters those days, and that is why we requested to choose this topic. Is that we have talked a lot in Odisha and in the country about cyclones and floods, and in fact, every state has done quite a bit, if not in mitigation, but at least in response regarding cyclone and floods. But still there are issues when it comes to fire. Though in Odisha we have a very robust fire service organization, we have about 350 fire stations, and OSDMA is working with DG Fire Services to strengthen the institutional capacity. Still we find fire is such a disaster which, as Professor Santosh Kumar has already pointed out, and Major General Bindal Saab was stuck. This is a 24/7 sort of thing. No warning will come before. And what happens? Fire, we get some information from different sources and then we respond. But how quickly we get the information and how quickly we respond determines our action. So I am not going to talk about that. Why I suggested this topic is that we in Odisha, I want to learn from other parts of the country, the national and global experiences, and try to strengthen the fire service organization and fire safety governance mechanism in the state. That is the purpose of my suggestion. In fact, Major General Bindal Saab already given the keynote address. I don't want to waste time. There are only few issues we would like to throw. All the causes are known. We know that yes, we have a poor regulatory and implementation framework. We have a very inadequate fire fighting system in the country. There is lack of knowledge and appreciation by building approval authorities at the city level as well as in rural areas. And then there is lack of inadequate investment in planning and designing the houses, whether it is individual house, whether it is a big housing complex, whether it is industrial things. Fire safety has not been treated the way it should have been. So how do we work to improve the regulatory framework? How do we improve the implementation framework? That is something which we need to do. And then the other aspect, when we talk of prevention and mitigation, In fact, we have with us Mr. Bijan, and who has led a movement. And the topic that has been chosen by him to speak today, why only a fire department cannot fight the fire or prevent the fire, and that talks of community involvement in fire risk reduction. And even Anup, my dear friend from World Bank, we have worked together. He is also talking about the topic, how do we involve communities to reduce the fire risks. So how do we use this knowledge to we all of us talk of DRR. How do we apply DRR to fire safety is the challenge before all of us. And I will be very happy to listen to this suggestion so that in Odisha at least we'll start doing something in a statewide scale. I don't believe in pilots any longer. We will be very happy, and thankfully the mitigation fund is now available. So earlier there was not much of fund available with the disaster management authorities other than fighting the response systems during calamities. But now that we have a disaster mitigation fund and the capacity building fund available with the SDMAs have improved with 15 Finance Commission grants, we can utilize this to improve the regulatory framework, to bring in the community involvement in the firefighting systems, and build the capacity of the respective departments to incorporate fire safety as a mandated requirement in all their works. Now we have gas grids, we have pipeline grids, we have chemical industries, we have many other things. But the states, we have not yet planned as to how do we address any disasters in such situations. So this workshop, at least to give us some ideas to start preparing the state towards mitigating fire as a disaster. And as Professor Santosh and Major General both have said, how do we reduce the damage and loss due to fire? These are the areas that commits itself to work, and this is what I look for from this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mohta. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much, because you have highlighted what General Bindal has mentioned in terms of the preparedness of urban governance and entire governance of disaster risk management. I reiterated that how we can, with the improved funding system, like we didn't have that much of a resources available with us, but now with the availability of mitigation fund, capacity development fund with the state government, how that regulatory framework can be brought under the change, and also that execution of framework. And these two, if we are taken up into a modern kind of a development process of urban areas, especially you mentioned about the pipelines and other things. So many things are coming which maybe the conventional firefighter might not be knowing that how to even address those issues. But I don't know the new generation firefighter who are coming, are they exposed to this kind of event or any other explosive which happens, and this will lead to further kinds of disaster. We always say that expect the unexpected and respond to disasters. So I would just thank you very much, Mr. Jena, for being with us, and also jointly organizing this workshop with NIDM, and your keen interest in taking this subject as a kind of a preventive rather than just being on the response side. But it's also very important to understand that how a response could be designed in the change scenario, so that at least in the response mode, if we prepare better, the response could be better. And when what kind of mistakes which we are committing in the response, and that probably would help in building capacity. So we have Mr. Dr. Mohanty, the Director General of the Fire Service of the Government of Odisha with us. I will just flag two issues before him, before I request him to address. when we talk about fire response, and now you are heading this institution, and many of the states are also participating in this. The Chief Fire Officer of Maharashtra, this Ahmed Gujarat, and Odisha. So this is important to understand when we say that international standard and the state of art. Like say that Germany has a response time linked that any urban areas, the response to the incident should be 8 to 15 minutes. In Japan, it is 5 to 10 minutes. And depending on the locations, of course, and USA is just to 4 to 8 minutes. In India, we need to see that what kind of this parameters which we are setting up or already set up in the urban area. And in this new congestion, what General Bindal also highlighted, this congestions are everywhere. The population density is increasing. Fire tenders are not able to move. And then depending on the self-sustainable system, whether each building should be sufficiently enough to respond to disasters. So how you think that in India, seeing other states and the country's parameters, India is prepared of. So this is, I'm requesting you to kindly address the gathering and educate us that how we should be taking in terms of various issues. You have been in the Indian Police Service. You are from 88 batch of Indian Police Service with the Karnataka, it's the Odisha cadre, and been in different positions at the district level, LSP, FSP, IG, DIG. So you have been seeing, responding to various law and order situation and also fire in different areas. So with this huge background of yours, how you would guide the deliberations of the day. I would request Dr. Mohanty to kindly deliver his address, please.
Thank you very much. And one welcome to all of you, Professor Santosh Kumar, my younger brother, friend, colleague, Sri Pradeep Jaina, Additional Chief Secretary, Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal, all the panelists. I'm really very happy that, the NIDM and the OSDMA have organized such a webinar where we can share our experiences and also learn from the experiences of other fire organizations, from experts who have been working in this field. Now, having regard to the objective of this particular webinar, basically mitigation we are discussing. I'll just brief outline of the Odisha Fire Service, what Mr. Jaina just now told, that probably we have more than 340 fire stations in Odisha spread across the state, which makes us probably one of the most favorable fire station to population ratio in the country. Then there is one more decision in the last decade, post super cyclone, by the government of Odisha to kind of build the capacity of each fire station, each of these 340 fire stations, as a multi-hazard response center, disaster response center. So what happened for about a decade, starting from 2007-8, it is continuing effort, but we got the result probably sometime after about 5-6 years. So we increased the capacity, we provided them equipment, we gave them training, so that we have a unique place in the country that in addition to the conventional mandate, that is firefighting and rescue operation, we are also doing disaster response in case of both man-made as well as natural disaster. So much so that we are now extending a helping hand to our neighboring states. For example, very recently we went to West Bengal following this Amphan. We went to Kerala in 2018 flood. We went to Andhra Pradesh 2014 Hudhud. So this is the capacity building which has resulted in prompt disaster response in the state, as well as extending to the neighboring states. So that is how we are. In fact, since we are discussing about fire mitigation, fire risk, I would like to give one small example. How, because what I see, the Odisha fire has conducted about more than 1,000 mock drills and 740 community awareness programs in last 3 years. When we kind of build the capacity of the community on mitigation, very difficult to quantify what is the result, because we cannot have some kind of an empirical study. Because unless a situation happens, somebody responds, it is difficult to quantify, empirically tell something about how it has been effective. But I can give you one example about this mitigation, about this training. What has happened in the last about 6 months, COVID era, the Odisha Fire Service has been given a mandate that we were fire auditing the fire safety of all the COVID facilities. There are about 150 COVID facilities in this state. Out of which there are about 40 odd hospitals, regular hospitals, who are supposed to have these fire safety certificates. We found that not many have these fire safety certificates, but since it's a pandemic situation, emergent situation, they have to run the hospitals, they have to treat the patients. What we did, instead of enforcing, we educated them. We were doing, in fact, every fortnight there is a fire safety drill in each of these hospitals, about 46, and about 100 odd COVID care centers in the state, organized by the local fire officers. They do mock drill. They teach them how to use, this fire extinguisher, how to respond, how to rescue immediately, smoke, how to break the glasses. Basic things they are, basically educating the staff of the hospitals. Here, why I'm giving this example, we could see the result. Unfortunately, in last month, August, sometime around 21st or 22nd of August, in one of these hospitals in Cuttack, there was a fire incident. There were about 128 patients and about 30 patients in the ICU. The fire was again from a short circuit. In the ICU, unfortunately, where these patients are basically on oxygen and they cannot move without any help. In this particular incident, what happened, before we could reach the staff, they have been able to handle this fire by using the fire extinguisher. They have started evacuating also. By the time probably the police and the fire they arrived. But initial those 5 to 6 minutes, the response was excellent by the staff. Then we analyzed how could they do this? This was probably the effect of this fire safety drill we have been doing every fortnight at each of these hospitals. So this is one example where we could see that by mere small training tips, valuable lives could be saved. And I give full credit to the staff, security staff, as well as the health staff of that hospital, that there was no casualty. And we could evacuate all the patients in about 1 hour time. Then the fire could be controlled within 5-7 minutes with the extinguisher. Of course, their own system also functioning, but the response of the staff of that hospital was commendable. And one of the reasons I found that 3 or 4 days before, the local fire officer had a fire drill, a mock drill in that hospital, which was in their mind, and they responded accordingly. So yes, this drill, this community awareness program will go a long way in mitigating this fire tragedy and loss of human lives. In fact, we have rewritten our own vision statement of Odisha fire. Just to read out, in one para we have mentioned to ensure community safety by creating basic awareness regarding fire safety, life safety, and disaster management among the people, and thereby mitigate the fire loss and improve effective and timely rescue and life-saving activities. This is one of our key vision statements of Odisha fire. Having said so, sir, you asked me about this response time. Yes, in the urban areas, the response time is 10 minutes as per our fire service manual, 1973. It is part of the statute. And in the rural areas, depending on the place, it is 15 to 20 minutes. And we have stuck to this kind of a timing in the urban areas. Rural areas, I have not tried. But I know about the urban area, Bhubaneswar Cuttack, this is less than 10 minutes now. But yes, we have kind of set a benchmark for ourselves in urban and rural areas for that matter. I'm very happy that the fire officers from Maharashtra, Gujarat, they are here. In fact, I would also like to know something about the Hazmat vehicle, which has been Maharashtra fire, Mumbai fire particularly, how far it is useful. Then Gujarat, I see that they have also procured this robotic fire tender. We would like to know how useful it is. Then beyond culture, Mr. Uday Vijay, I just had a look in the website, doing excellent job. I must compliment you. You know, when there is a awareness in the community, naturally everything falls in places. For example, I saw that in Bangalore, a person can, SMS to the fire service that this particular building is violating the fire safety norms, and the fire service responds to such SMS. That means when the community is aware about the responsibility of the builders, of the owners, occupiers of the buildings who are supposed to have these fire safety measures, then this will multiply. This will put pressure on the fire department. There will be an obligation also to verify. So we would like to also implement similar kind of things in the urban areas. We'd like to hear from you. Thank you very much once again, NIDM, OSDMA, particularly Mr. Pradeep Jena and Professor Santosh Kumar, Major General Bindal, for organizing this webinar. We would definitely benefit from the national experience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mohanty, and this was very, very encouraging to know that how this Odisha State Fire Department responded to various disasters, not only in the state, but also outside these states, different states you are taking in the time of COVID, which we say the difficult time for the responders. And upon when happened in West Bengal and Bangladesh, and during that time your force took a challenge that responded and adjusted to the system and the environment of COVID-19, and you could respond very nicely. So my compliment to you, your leadership, and also the government of Odisha for taking this initiative. And also the point which you have brought in terms of the very important point to left with, which you were saying, that how technology is going to implement after giving this time frame that yes, the rural area is 15 to 20 minutes, depending on the distance and location, and also that urban area is 10 minutes for Odisha. And you are adhering to that, but still there is a gap which you need to fill and move ahead. Reason which that ensure community safety, and you're talking about disaster risk reduction in the time of fire, and the timely response and saving lives of the people, which is the vision you have highlighted. This probably the vision should have been they all must be having two major points about the technology. that how hazmat model is being used, hazmat van is being used in other parts of the country, like Gujarat or Maharashtra. Maharashtra is also is considered as one of the best fire management, and Odisha you have already mentioned, and also robotic fire model which you are mentioning again and again. So thank you very much for bringing the technology part and also that community engagement in reducing the time and better preparedness and how to respond in the difficult time at COVID-19. Thank you very much once again for being with us and sharing your views. And I would request also you to be kindly be with us so that we can have some question answer and guidelines while we will be shaping. We have now, but we wish to share something which you mentioned before I invite the panelists. Now we have, this is the ideal time which we thought we should capitalize when more than 330 delegates have joined from all over the country in our this today's webinar to discuss, and not to discuss but to reiterate that COVID-19, as you mentioned about that how you responded during this time. So how to have a, just for information to the people, that government of India when Jan Andolan and public awareness is there, we are saying this in how wear mask always, clean your hands for 20 seconds. Then you always do not take your hands to your mouth and nose, have a distance, and also sanitize and keep washing your hands. So sanitization. So what we say that this is important lesson as a preventive thing which we are talking about today. So prevention from COVID-19, this we wanted to share. Now I would like to request Mr. Anup Karant, specialist from the World Bank. He has been engaged in various projects of the World Bank and long years of disaster risk management. I have seen him since 2001 when he was working with Taru and dedicatedly working for risk assessment. Mr. Anup was there in that whole process. And now today in the World Bank, working with various state government, with the government of India. So I would request Mr. Anup Karant to share some of his views on this disaster risk management thing. Mr. Anup.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Very good morning to everyone. Thanks, Professor Santosh, for the kind introduction. At the outset, I would like to thank OSDMA, Pradeep Jaina sir, as well as Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal for giving me this opportunity. And I think it's a very important topic. And I'm not a real expert on fire safety, but fire has always been a first interest me. And having seen a couple of fires happening very close where I had to do some kind of an escape, around to ensure that, I am safe and people around me are safe. I think this is a subject which is very close to my work. Most of the work that I do on the building safety side of it in various institutions that I worked, even in my past career, I have always made sure that, this is an area that is touched upon when we look at design of infrastructure. So very specifically, let me also make a point here. I think what Mr. Satyajit Mohanty just mentioned, I think that was very, very nice to hear from him in terms of how the COVID hospitals, and these hospitals were also built with certain amount of urgent requests, where you need to create a new facility, you need to make sure that things are ramped up. And as he also mentioned that people who come there come with different kind of issues. And I think at any point of time, if there is a fire, I think this is something which is going to be really very challenging for any system to take over. And I think the tool that he talked about, educating people around this, I think that is one of the most important things that needs to be done as far as fire safety is concerned. So getting down to my presentation, and I will try to do a bit quick on this so that the experts on this panel have more time to really talk about the core issues. My emphasis here is on the community risk reduction as an entry point for mitigating urban fires. And I actually chose this topic for a couple of reasons. One, I understand that, we always talk in terms of, what is the requirement, and the requirement in terms of the capacity vis-a-vis the kind of growth that we have. It's going to be next to impossible to meet those kind of requirements around traditional agencies to come on board and look at this aspect of fire safety. The second thing, we're talking about Odisha, and Odisha has been one of the pioneer states across the country to have actually put a sort of a very robust mechanism for the community-based disaster risk management. So my presentation is basically to not sell the idea of community-based disaster risk management, but basically reinforce that community-based disaster risk management has been quite successful, and it is important to use that tool and leverage on that kind of mechanism to really address the fire safety across the country. What you see here on this particular slide is basically the city of Delhi. When you see it from Google, I mean, this is a settlement called Govindpuri, and I've been there on many occasions. I mean, one of the occasions I've been here is to really understand on the structural safety part of it. During the earlier association with NIDM, when NIDM used to undertake a large number of trainings for the municipal engineers on building safety, and we have walked through these lanes of Govindpuri and a lot of other buildings what you see in the vicinity. This picture gives us 4 or 5 points. One thing it definitely talks about is the varying density of clusters in an urban environment. You see a lot of small packed settlements. There are slightly large packed settlements, and then you have high-rise structures. So the density is something which also governs in terms of what is the kind of situation that we need to deal with it when we talk about fire safety. The second point I would like to make here is that when we look at the large number of fires that has been happening over the country and across urban areas specifically, there is a sort of a very intrinsic link about fire exposure, fire vulnerability, and the poverty. And this is something which is closely linked, and I think we have seen that repeatedly that urban slums go through a significant experience of burning down year after year, and the settlements come back and again they get burnt year after year. So what I mean to say is that when you look at this from a urban planning perspective, the adoption of a local level mitigation plan, and making that as part of a comprehensive city disaster management plan becomes very necessary. And in the center, I think what is required is to also bring the role of the community as a sort of a key focus. When it comes down to the spatial analysis aspect, I think 15 years ago, I'm sure 20 years ago, we did not have that kind of technology with us to do risk mapping, etc. But I think with the availability of spatial analysis platforms and the kind of database that are generated, especially with the fire departments on terms of event records, I think it's very important that city comes up with preparing clusters of fire risk, so that we are very sure in terms of where are the high probability areas and how one can actually tackle it by also bringing in a lot of local capacity building aspects, and also strengthening the requirements or infrastructure, which could be very local. I mean, it is not necessary that we need to have a sort of a big fire station coming there, but if the communities are sensitized enough, I think that's something where one can actually look in terms of reducing the fire risk. And when I look at this map, what I can typically see, if we bring in the whole CBDRM, kind of a mechanism here, I mean, there can be a series of demonstration communities, that one can actually pick up in a urban area like Delhi or Bhubaneswar or Cuttack, or for that matter, any other city in the country, wherein the choice is to look in terms of how do we promote capacity building, and also look in terms of the building resilience of the society as a whole. Let me go to the next slide. So this slide, I am sure most of you would know in terms of the numbers, but I know interestingly, I would like to see some clusters here. The cluster that you see here, some of the countries, especially the US, you see a sort of a significant drop vis-a-vis the trend in the number of fire deaths. Well, in India, we do see that there has been a peak. At one point of time, I think during the 90s, I mean, the peak actually touched about 25,000, and I think we are definitely seeing one more peak, somewhere around the 2001 period, 2002 period, and then we are seeing a sort of a significant dip in terms of the number of deaths. Not sure in terms of the number of injuries, how that essentially looks like, but I'm very sure there has been a lot of work that has been going around, especially when it comes down to the built environment, the structural improvements that are happening in terms of the use of modern materials, etc. But I'll take a dip into that at a later point of time. But this is just to give you a sense of the overall trend. There are some countries which have been doing extremely well in terms of keeping the numbers phenomenally low. We still stand as one of the key leaders in terms of the death statistics, when it comes down to the fire deaths, reported. This is for the year 2018. What we typically see is around a large number of fires that happen. And when you look at India, we can see the number of fire deaths was 12,747. And when you look at this number, when over a period of 4 to 5 years, so 2014 it was 19,513, then it was 17,000. So we see a sort of a dip. And I think when it comes down to 2019, I just Vijay does a lot of Uday Vijayan does a lot of very interesting work on educating the community, and I'm a big fan of what he does in Bangalore, and also reaching out to a large number of other people around what can be a kind of a potential learning from Bangalore to other cities. And this is just one of the quiz that is currently floating on his Beyond Carton webpage. And it's very interesting to see the numbers of 2019, which is actually picked up from the NCRPB records. It is 10,915. So we typically hope that, over a period of time, with awareness, with a lot of, movement around fire safety installations happening, this number, I think we should be able to really reduce it to almost zero. I think that is a kind of, tolerance that we should actually believe in terms of, how we want to take the journey forward. This is a very interesting study, and this was my first introduction to fire safety. And Mr. Dastur, who is on this call, I think he would recollect that I was a student way back in 1997. When this study was actually conducted by my institution, where I studied where I did my graduation in construction technology. And this was the first time when we were introduced to fire safety as a sort of a course. I'm not very sure how much of this thing is actually trickled in other institutions in terms of having it as part of the curriculum, especially for the civil engineers, the electrical engineers, or for that matter, the mechanical and the architecture curriculum. But one thing which we got exposed to was phenomenal. The entire batch got exposed to understanding, and I think it was a sort of an effort that we did with the Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation, the Ahmedabad Fire and Emergency Services Department, and we actually went down to understand in terms of what provisions are being done with respect to the codal provisions outlined and the local building bylaws. And it was very interesting to see that 23 years ago, when this survey was done, we came across four or five major findings, and this findings was presented into several forums. Was very low. The staff shortage was very much visible in the department. This came out very clear, and I understand even the recent understanding on the staffing is a bit low. I think there's still a 30% deficiency around it. More proneness, the more powers are required for the fire department to really go down and seal down buildings, where the non-compliances are being done. I think there is a bit of an issue there where the department do not have that kind of an adequate power to really go down and seal the buildings. And there is a sort of a high level of gross violation which are being done on the bylaws. I mean, the bylaws may bring in certain specific aspects, and it still continues. This was 1997. And, just as a curiosity to come into this presentation, I just went into the website of the Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation to just understand in terms of what is the status today. And it's very interesting to see that, we still have about 309 buildings, where I think the NOC is something, which is still not there. So what it tells very clear and loud is that, there is a lot of, construction activity and a lot of development happening where I think the violation and the awareness is so low that, people would continue to probably go and start residing in these locations, in those buildings where they may be risking their lives. And I think there is a lot that needs to be done around it. When we touched upon, the deficiency part, which I think in the morning, we heard from the speakers that we have sort of a significant deficiency when it comes down to what we have in vis-a-vis the Standing Fire Advisory Committee norms, and we do have this kind of big numbers, fire stations, firefighting, rescue vehicle deficiency, fire personnel deficiency, etc., etc. These numbers can move in here and there depending in terms of how the investment happens, what kind of parameters are taken for the study, etc. One thing which I would also like to bring in here is that apart from the gaps here, one of the critical gaps which are very important for the country to also understand and fill up this is on the size of the burn injury wards. I think the burn centers do suffer a lack of data and also the facilities, and we also seen that more than 1 million people across the country would be suffering burn injuries. This is from a report from the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare for 2018, I think, which basically talks about the requirement in terms of ability and having dedicated burn care units. And I think a lot of work needs to be done around this, given that there are a large number of people who suffer from these burn injuries. Coming very specifically to some important things, and I'm drawing a lot of this information here, not because that I work so much exclusively as a professional in fire safety, but all the slides, what you see are a lot of work which is being done around this area, and I'm just drawing an my attention to the training module which was developed by NIDM on the urban risk mitigation, where this has been delivered in many forums. And I think very recently, after the fire tragedies that hit India last year, I think even the NDMA, on the formation day, took fire safety as a sort of a very important agenda into the discussions. Things what you see in urban areas is that, one is that we are fastly urbanizing as a country. The urban areas are redefining the spaces in most of the places and how we live. There is a lot of issue on the safety infrastructure for fire safety, which is not developed vis-a-vis the kind of development that is happening. We all know that very well. Most interestingly is that within the homes, there is a lot of change in terms of the material that is happening. And I think Venkatachalam, who basically made a presentation in the fire safety, discussions in NDMA on the formation day, did talk about how polymeric materials are being brought into the house, and which actually reduces the response time significantly if there is a fire inside the house. Lifestyle changes have increased significantly. The access to electricity, access to storage devices. I think we have more gadgets in homes, that can actually get into the sockets. We have smaller number of sockets in homes vis-a-vis the number of gadgets that people own. And it is interesting that we just get an extension cord and we put it up, and these are some of the major sources for fire. The expanding of the areas into the mixed land use, I think this is something which needs to be carefully analyzed from a planning perspective. There's a lot that needs to be done. So what it sums up is that when you look at the Delhi Fire Services information, especially on the report that NIDM has published, it actually talks about electric short circuits, as one of the major issue. Human carelessness, and a couple of other factors, which are very, very important to be noted in terms of how do we address it. There are a large number of work and large number of guidelines which have been prepared across the country. So I think from a resource perspective, in terms of what needs to be done, I think fairly good and comprehensive understanding. The codes are very robust in nature. I mean, one can always improve the code, but I think what is important is to see how that actually trickles down in terms of actual implementation. I would just like to draw an attention here and not go into all the details, but this is a sort of very interesting work which is done by NIDM, and this actually captures something very interesting. It actually brings down a whole lot of analysis of all the major fires that have happened in this country. It also looks at the issue of governance aspects. It looks very specifically into what kind of strategies need to be built up, etc. And one of the strategies that comes out very clear and loud, and this is something which I'm sure Uday Vijayan will be talking in detail on the how of doing it, is actually looking at the community, the building the community resilience and ensuring that the stakeholder participation brings in community in the forefront, creating awareness among the public, and the better level of preparedness that we need to really factor in terms of reducing loss of life and reducing loss of property. One of the references which I came across, which I find it extremely useful, is the NFPA 1035, which actually defines the community risk reduction as programs, actions, and services used by a community which can prevent, mitigate the loss of life, property, and resources associated with life safety, fire, and other disasters within a community. There's a very interesting paper published in 2016. The Urban Fire and Life Safety Task Force actually details it out very clearly in terms of how can the community reduction plan development process, be brought into the forefront of, life safety and public safety. And I believe that, if this kind of an approach is taken by large with the SDMAs and the fire and emergency services in the forefront and getting community involved, right from the way the NOCs are being issued to educating them on various aspects of how to have a plan, within each of the building blocks. I mean, it's a very interesting document that MHA had brought out, which is called the building level emergency response plans. And I think when it gets down to high-rise buildings, when it gets into cluster of buildings, I think it's important to look in terms of, how these kind of, structures can be pushed in very hard and make it as part of your larger engagement on the community disaster preparedness plan at the city level, make it a part of, the larger aspect of the city disaster management plan as well as the home preparedness plan. What it essentially says is that you do these several steps, also have feedback in terms of, taking back the learnings and, revisit and, ensure that the community is very much strengthened to understand the gaps, also establish, the required contacts and, help them to develop a kind of a plan, based on their issues. And I think this is going to be a sort of a very important approach should the SDMAs take it on the forefront. And I know SDMAs are working a lot on the community-based disaster preparedness plan when it comes down to managing floods, managing seismic events, managing landslides, and managing tsunami risks. But when it comes down to fire safety, I think this is an area where SDMAs can collaborate with the fire and emergency services and strengthen the whole system. There are a few things, when it gets down to how to go about doing it. I mean, this can be built on several aspects. Not going to the details of each one of them, but I think education is going to be significantly important. Enforcement, as I mentioned, the enforcement can be done to a great extent, but what if the community living in that building, do not respect that? I mean, staircases are blocked, and we have a lot of issues how buildings after being handed over are misuse. And I have a lot of examples around it where I have going, visiting, buildings, talking to the RWA, asking them in terms of status of the firefighting equipment installed 10 years ago. 99% of the cases you see that none of them are functional. And I have personally worked very closely with the Delhi Fire Services to come and help and install some of these defunct systems and get the society make responsible for managing and maintaining those assets. I mean, people have a lot of resources to have lawns and swimming pools being maintained. But I think when it comes into fire services, there is a general lack of awareness in terms of what needs to be done around it. Engineering aspects, I will not get into the details. The codes are there, and there's a lot of research work being done in India, especially IIT Gandhinagar. Taking the example of the Grenfell Tower, which actually had a major fire in London. I have seen a lot of change being done in terms of experiments. Bringing out some sort of very solid knowledge products on that. And interestingly, cities like Gurgaon and all, where some of the local institutions came forward and they actually changed the facade of the building. And I think this is very important. What happens in London is not necessary; it cannot happen elsewhere. I mean, it can happen anywhere. And I think taking the learning and looking at what IIT Gandhinagar has done and looking at how institutions in Gurgaon especially went around changing the facade, I think it's fascinating to see how decisions are being made. Emergency response, as I said, no matter, even if we fill up 80% of the deficiency staff, what we think about, I think the emergency response has to be more driven at the people level. I think communities has to basically have an emergency response plan where they can take up decisions and start responding immediately when the fire actually starts sort of a breakout. And these are urban fires. I'm not talking about petrochemical fires or big tanker accidents. I mean, those are very complex, but I think when it comes down to building fires, a lot can be mitigated by ensuring that people stick to enforcement and also have their own plans prepared. This is one example I am drawing it. I'm just going to go to the next slide. This is just an example to talk about how community-based fire assessment was. Yes. Just checking. The last slide, sir. Last slide. On the community-based fire risk assessment, which was done in Vietnam, in PDR, and just to give you a sense in terms of how communities have come forward to prepare a kind of a fire risk map for the city using basic resources, not a high-end GIS, but this was something which was very successful. Two more slides here. This is just to give you a sense of a fire that I was involved in, where one of my offices was completely gutted. This was in 2009. Where none of the fire extinguishers actually worked, nothing actually worked in that building. And surprisingly, 2019, you can see those three images. I mean, it is still a work in progress. It has taken 10 years. I mean, again, a lot needs to be done. This is one more picture where I basically use this as a reference point using my mobile phone to basically capture information of violations, send it out to the departments. This was March 1st, 2015. March 11th, you can see a security guard standing there. The door was open. 1 month down the line, 2 months down the line, again, we see the doors getting closed. I mean, I'll just stop here, but what I'm basically saying is that the role of community is significantly important and we need to emphasize on that. Thanks a lot, Professor Santosh Kumar. I know I've stepped a bit over time. That's all from my side.
Thank you so much, Mr. Anup. Brilliant. How you brought experience and 5 E's, which you have mentioned about this, how to make community resilient and community engagement in the entire process of fire risk management, from stretching this entire experience from your student days to until now in the various squatters evidences that how that every year it happened. And these 5 key points which have been explaining and giving the brilliant work which is being done by Mr. Udayan in Bangalore. That it's very interesting, and you referred time and again about during your presentation about Gujarat initiatives. And Mr. Dastoor is here. So the point which you are saying that how community got to be engaged and how it can work and in various moments and various stages. With the international thing, that how exactly we have been able to reduce these deaths and in different years of time. So, Mr. Dastoor, you are a very passionate fire worker. I say that you are a passionate worker, officer, or kind of a risk reduction managers. You didn't go into fire service because you wanted a job. You have inherited also this from your passion from one generation to another generation. If I know you very well in terms of my interaction during the Gujarat earthquake time. And since then, you have been working day and night and taking this forward. What all the 3 speakers have mentioned and the challenges which they have posed, how as a solution you have provided in Gujarat in taking actions whether it's density versus kind of preparedness or our capacity, or urban disaster which is happening in the terms of fire, short circuiting, which General Bindal also highlighted about this work which is being done by the local electrician, and to larger factory and other household fire, the fire which we are seeing. How you would address this as a solution, which other states are looking forward to, and all the participants are actually looking into this, that Gujarat as a kind of whether this can go as a model to emulate, and in what way? Mr. Dastoor. Mr. Dastoor, are you there?
Yes, am I audible?
Mr. MP Dastoor, State Fire Officer, Chief Fire Officer from Gujarat. I think I'm not able to hear you.
Sir, he is there, but his audio is very low. One second.
Mr. Dastoor, can you try your mic nearer to you or something, other device you can use, or just speak on so that we can hear you?
Am I audible now?
Sound is coming. Go ahead, ho sakta hai, in the process we can.
If you could mute the video, maybe the sound quality will be better.
Am I audible now?
Sir, it's the same.
Or you are using something else?
Microphone. Kumar ji, could we kindly invite Mr. Rahangdale because he is online, I think.
Hello. Yeah, we can invite now this Mr. Sethi, or you should invite Mr. Vijay.
Mr. Rahangdale.
Hello.
Mumbai.
Mr. Rahangdale, Deputy.
Mr. Prabhat, I wanted Mumbai a little later, but okay.
Okay.
Mumbai Chief Fire Officer, I can request him because Mr. Dastoor things are not working. So may I request you to. Now I'm requesting Mumbai. Mr. Prabhat. Mr. Prabhat Rahangdale. I will just say something about your fire services in Maharashtra. Every time whenever the fire happened in the country, a big fire, we looked at the Mumbai Municipal Corporation fire and in services preparedness, and many things people are and the modern things which you have been able to say, and also what Mr. Anup Karant was mentioning. You have heard all the speakers, so I'm not going to just debate on that what they have been saying. That as a solution, being the what you have experienced, and to add on what Odisha has also mentioned, what kind of a new thing which you would like to suggest as a solution to at this forum? Maharashtra, although we know that one or two times it also being in the kind of people were looking and raising their eyebrows that Maharashtra government's fire services is very, very up to mark. But at some point of time when fire took place and the fire tender itself reached very late. So in this kind of a situation, when any state is preparing and learning from your experience of Maharashtra, where density is the key, especially in Mumbai, population density and urbanization. What are your thoughts and suggestions which you would like to say? Mr. Prabhat, I welcome you and I request you to kindly deliberate.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you very much, Professor Santosh Kumar, respected NDMA, NIDM, Kumar Bindal sir, Executive Director, NIDMA, then Pradeep Jina Saab, the Chief Secretary, and Sanjit Mohanty, Service Odisha. Can you start the presentation? Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Yeah, why the presentation? Presentation. Yeah, slides. I think presentation has to be there.
Sir, I have made you as the presenter. You can share your screen.
Screen one?
Screen?
Yeah, already done.
So now
First,
you can
open your
see our
presentation.
Presentation open.
Put your PPT.
No, we loaded it on there.
ते तुमच्याकडे माग.
Oh, you require to have PPT from my side. It on, I think the input which was given to me loaded from your side.
So we did not receive. So if you have the PPT, you can share
No,
right
this is a
now.
You can
different.
share now.
Okay.
We will do that.
On my, but forget. Hello, I can speak for 15 minutes without opinion, not an issue. Yep.
Sure, sir.
Yep. Yeah. Sorry for inconvenience first, and thank you very much for being privileged to be a part of this webinar. Definitely, PPT would have helped me to foresee. But everybody knows Mumbai now. The Mumbai is a kind of a city where you have a huge population. You do have a huge infrastructure coming up. It's a kind of a cluster which comprises of right from apartments to a high-rise building to a small scale industry to the biggest industry like RCF and the petrochemical. And definitely the Mumbai does have their own challenges. When actually I was working for more than a 5.5 year as a chief fire officer now, and also looking after the whole director as a director of National Fire Service. Director of Fire Service. Anup already highlighted what are the problems, what are kind of he already shared the data, what kind of a status we have as far as the fire incidents and then the casualty rates and what kind of a response is required. So actually, we are when I became a chief fire officer that time, maybe a 5.5 years back, I started with the program on enhancement of emergency response, wherein there are two components, and this component which has to be implemented was in a realistic way. The two components were very simple. One is definitely a response, because that was my first priority, because there are challenges but to address these challenges you have to be realistic. So Mumbai that time we were that time 35 fire stations for the city of Mumbai, and as per our the requirement, we require more than 100 fire stations, say, to have a same response as put it into it's like like in a 3 minutes or 2 minutes, but taking into account of this congestion and all, what we implemented is a mini fire station concept, because it was doable, it was short way to do it, and then we introduced more than 16 mini fire stations within 1.5 years. So now, as on today, there are 35 fire stations and 16 mini fire stations. So around 41 fire stations, are of a mediation system, which definitely have a big role to board, like building permissions, then inspection. Luckily, Maharashtra has this Maharashtra Fire Service, where we have a Maharashtra Life Safety and Fire Prevention Act, wherein we can do an inspection, and most of the buildings were inspected. We have given thousands of cases. Lot of actions were simultaneously being done. As far as Maharashtra is concerned, we do have a 275 fire stations. Definitely, we are not like a state fire service. We do have our own limitation. As a director, I'm like an advisor. But now we started with the recruitment process to have whole district to be connected with the director Maharashtra Fire Service. And for that, what are the requirements are there? We have a Abhiyan where we already have a fund system which is coming in. We do have our PLA account where we do have a fund for giving a good type of infrastructure. But the whole process started 3 years back. No doubt it takes time, whatever everybody knows. But what we did is like a whole network system really required to be done, and for that purpose we implemented all we are in a process of implementing two facts: one is infrastructure and as well as manpower. And for that, luckily, in our own directorate, we do have our own training center where we have a sub officer courses and then fireman courses. So tomorrow, if there is going to be a challenge, we are going to implement the whole state-wise plan, then how the manpower has to be. So we are kind of prepared for that. From that, when we speak about whole scenario, like response agency, I'll just give one example. Recently, there was a fire, this thing, very big house collapse which has happened near Mahad. Definitely, we always say, like, we have a 20 minutes response time, 25 minutes, but no doubt, Mahad Fire Service reach at the spot in 20 minutes. But kind of a reinforcement required, kind of the resources required for that kind of a magnitude, which took me more than 6 hours. So that is a limitation, not only in Maharashtra, but it's every part of the India. When we talk about the response, we really require to analyze and really go into very deep into what kind of infrastructure and what kind of a whole development to implement not only a response but the mitigation, what kind of resources are required. So we are all working on it. Apart from that, no doubt, in fire services, the communication plays very important role. For when I was a chief fire officer, one of the, I think Mumbai Fire Brigade is one of the city where we do have a most advanced command and control system, which is integrated with the disaster management control room where now I am sitting. And because of that, any part in Mumbai where something happens, not only a response, but whole mechanism of a resource development is also in a place. So technologically, if I speak about communication, we have a command and control with the GIS GPS integration, which is at part to the developed country. Apart from that, the technology on a real ground, no doubt, robotic based nowadays a good role. And we do robots now to fight a fire where we do have a congestion, we do have a our response or resources to be deployed, wherein our manpower, our own men are in danger. That time, recently there were 2-3 fires where we actually use these robots. So this is a future wherein, no doubt in India we are very cautious to use technology, but because the man behind the technology really has to work. So, but both of the things, on a fire ground, the technology is working very well. On a backup system like a integrated command and control system is working seamlessly. So that is a rather result oriented and practical solution we seek and we are following for the city of Mumbai. Okay, now going into that in a COVID scenario, definitely in COVID, Mumbai Fire Brigade as well as I really appreciate each of the fire services across India. They worked tremendous. I'm proud to be a part of the fire fraternity because the way I saw each of the firemen, like whether it's a sanitization program, whether recently Modi Saab said like the hospitals where the COVID centers were put, they don't have a fire and safety recommendation in place. Team was there in Mumbai where we also started the drill, knowing what kind of uh, we really had to change our role because the PP has to wear, then the whole. There was one big challenge. There was a lot of calls which has happened. Social distancing was on the back of a mind of all firemen, but we work in a buddy system in fire service, and the chaos, the panic, the anxiety, and still we all my firemen has done fantastic job, and as a disaster management DMC, I was taking care of whole networking of hospitals. That is through a EOC where I am sitting now. The response for any of the calls which happens any of the area, and apart from that the sanitization program, the scientific way to go ahead with the sanitization program, that was established. The SOPs were established. Apart from that, I do also care. I do have another portfolio that is security. The security was one of the issue because in COVID centers where you have my own security guards were getting affected more than I think in Mumbai Fire Brigade we do have a number of around 6 to 8 and in security department also 6 to 8 around 8 to 9 security guards they died because of the COVID. So that was another challenge. Because of that, we started our own COVID center. That is one of the example, rather to have your own COVID center so that the morale of the firemen really required to be, on a high side because we are responding on a calls. We are managing the emergencies and in the situation like COVID. So now it all got stabilized. But at the initial stage, I really appreciate all the efforts of the firemen and the security. And in fact, in disaster management, where I'm sitting, there were a lot of infection happened. Still, it was working 24/7. So these are the challenges of the modern days, whether it's a pandemic, whether it's where it is, where you have realistically kind of a growth which is happening, the way our whole resources required to be put into place and speaking, we don't have a resources, but again the budgeting is the issue. So there are a lot of challenges, but when you put everything into a proper planning, what really practically require, and how you go ahead. When I become a chief I became a chief fire officer that time. Did a 5 years program where we planned everything. We had a budget allotment, and I think that more than a 70 to 80% of the success. And the main aim towards my whole planning was jotted to one thing, which is require a response. So I'm really sorry with the presentation. There was some confusion, but I think most of the things which are required to be highlighted, taking into a whole scenario of fire services in India, I think I made the point. Again, thank you very much for giving me an opportunity.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Very much, Mr. Prabhat. This is that's what you are a very decorated officer. You have been taking a lot of initiatives and President Medal awarded to you for your very convincing work in modernizing and also taking the challenge. And you said very important point, other than whatever you have said about this, how you implemented and technology, how you paid, just not focused on preventing fire, but also preventing death of the firemen who are the responders by using technology, robot, and all. This is a very good implication of this implementation plan. And you said that most of the time you engage yourself in planning. And that's why we started with this. Unless and until you plan, then you are not going to succeed. And this is a very good model for risk reduction, which you have mentioned, and how you have been able to do that. And the second point, which I can learn from this presentation, is the capacity when we are talking about for the future to develop for the firemen, is a multiple capacity are required now. As you mentioned about COVID-19 at the time of disaster also, from sanitizing to responding to disasters and everything. So this is the new challenge which has emerged in the country. Level, one should be preparing for the future with the density and also the challenges. I extend my heartfelt thanks to you, Mr. Prabhat, at this point of time, and I would request you to kindly be with us so that the question answer session we would take. But we request Mr. Dastur, if you are there, to just move with the presentation. Mr. Dastur, are you there?
Good afternoon, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible. Very good. Please go ahead.
Thank you for inviting. I would like to start with the preparedness part. What we the city, as we say, our response time in the city is around 7 to 10 minutes, and only two places which are away, 16 minutes, which will be shortened as short as 3 minutes in a year's time, as there are fire stations coming up in those areas. If we talk of the rural areas, forest fires, very little is done to address those. We do not have effective water transport system with hose layers and all for a bigger distance and a bigger volume, which should be there. And then prevention, especially industries, because if we see the statistics, there are no lives lost, or maybe minimal, after the fire service aside, because what has happened, and before the fire service reach the spot, the damage is already done. So we are left to only saving life and property, lost properties, and especially properties surrounding the scene of fire in case of factories. Major issue what we have seen is no plans for factories are approved by the fire department, or nobody comes for approval of plans, because they have one single shade built up and the whole factory is insulated inside one shed. A small fire with results into the whole factory being gutted down. Compartmentation which is required, ventilation which is required is not there. So even if compartmentation is taken care of, and escape routes in factories where there are big fires already have advised them and got route or an emergency exit every 40 meters, so that it is covered up. This may not be possible. We have gone in for monkey ladders so that people would not get trapped inside and come out. The first thing which I'll talk is of ventilation, maybe the basement or maybe a building, maybe a hotel, where your exhaust system is installed, is or maybe if we say 10% efficient or 20% efficient, not more than that. Against that, we have come up with positive pressure ventilation, and all buildings in Ahmedabad especially are advised on to have a positive pressure ventilation where you have fresh air or cooler air compared to the place on fire being continuously pumped in, or which takes care of hot gases and smoke going out from the other end. So the cooling already done. Even your visual or visibility firemen takes place better, and so the firefighting can be done accordingly. Also show some positive pressure ventilators that we have made in-house, and even the blowers, portable blowers, what we have, are being installed with water mist system. Even the sooty smoke would go down, cooling would be done. And today, Gujarat has more than 200 small fire tenders which have high pressure mist system. We have developed a fire tender which has a robo inside, and the robo goes up to 500 meters. It's a high pressure system, and the robo is to do 300 liters per minute, which results into about 3 lakh liters of mist per minute. So 1 liter of water goes into 1,000 liters of mist, which is a feet per second, and 50 micron water particle. We have combined the mist system, which is used in the state of Gujarat now, and the Ahmedabad was the pioneer to this introduction of the fire tenders with mist system. And now in the state of Gujarat, we have more than 200. There's 200 for the government department and other privates also. So we have more than 200 high pressure tenders available now. And as positive pressure ventilation is concerned, if the buildings are not equipped with positive pressure ventilation, we have our own portable system now, at least one portable positive pressure ventilation for each fire station to respond, and each vehicle, even a water tender type B, has a second line of attack with the mist system. Thereby you have additional cooling, the latent heat is absorbed, the hot gases and smoke don't come back to the firemen, and aided with the mist, we have pressure ventilator going in form of portable one. We are developing a smaller one, more powerful than those available in the market, and proves very cheap. So and the mist, again, an advantage that we have we use less water. There's no chances of electrocution to the firemen. Even your hydrocarbon fire can be extinguished very fast. It is very fast reactor, very fast action, suppressing fires and all. I'll just show you. It's a small demo. I'm at my office, and we'll be showing you that. I'll go off the picture. You can see the demo that is being done. Just 2 or 3 minutes. It's a robo.
Sorry to interrupt you, sir. Your video is not visible.
It works at about 300 liters per minute, and the robo, and you can see the high pressure, the high velocity. You do not even need, or the robo can project water and mist at distance of more than 30 meters.
Mr. Dastur, can you put the video on?
It can shoot straight.
Sir.
And if the robo part is over, Then you go for mist.
Mr. Dastoor,
Go there.
Sir, I think he cannot hear
The
us.
portable.
Dastoor, you need to put the video on. Your video is off. Mr. Dastoor, your video is off. Put the video on.
Here you have a small portable ventilator which is about 50 kilos in weight and gives about 50,000 CFM flow, and again assisted by a mist system. If you carry into the building, you can ventilate.
Mr. Dastoor, can you hear me? Mr. Dastoor, can you hear me? Mr. Dastoor, can you hear me?
Then you see the
Mr. Dastoor, Mr. Dastoor,
mounted
can you?
unit.
Another, can
goes
you
into-
make
Sir, I'm
call
trying
to
to
him?
reach. Yes, sir, I'm
More
trying to
than-
reach this number.
1.5 lakh CFM with 400 liters per minute of mist going on at 100 bar pressure. Hope you could see the demo. It's a bit noisy outside and the units making
No, we
quite some.
not able to hear you. So we are able to hear you, but we don't see the video.
Okay, you could see the video, then I could explain. We have a vehicle which we have named it Sheshnag, which is a hybrid.
Mr. Dastoor, just listen to me. Your video is off. Can you put your video on so that we can see you?
So
आपका वीडियो ऑफ है दस्तूर साहब, वीडियो ऑन करें.
could you see the demo or no?
नो वीडियो आपका ऑफ है, वीडियो ऑन करें.
Now?
Yes. Can see you now.
Can you see it now?
Yes, yes, sir.
हाँ, अब आपका वीडियो आ रहा है.
For the demo to be done again. This is our vehicle which has a robo which goes into the back of the vehicle connected by a
Video has.
30 mm hose that carries high pressure mist, 100 bar high pressure mist system.
It's not visible.
And here you can see the robo operating.
No. We are not able to hear. See.
Can you see?
No, sir.
No. Okay, you conclude your point because some problem in video. So kindly conclude your point, what you want to say.
Hello.
हाँ मिस्टर दस्तूर, आप कंक्लूड करें अपनी बात. जस्ट कंक्लूड करें.
चल ले भाई, હવે જલ્દી આ 500 કિલો દબાઈ હવે આ શું? Am I audible?
हाँ, अपनी बात आप कहें. आपकी बात सुन रहे हैं, वीडियो नहीं अवेलेबल है. आप अपनी बात कंक्लूड करें. आप अपनी बात कंक्लूड करें. अब फाइनल कंक्लूजन.
हेलो.
यस मिस्टर दस्तूर, आप अपनी फाइनल बात कहें. जस्ट फिनिश ऑफ with your conclusion.
Okay. Can you see me now?
No, we can't see you. तो आप पहले अपनी बात.
Okay. So we have a high pressure system which is developed vehicle which has a robo which has a 500 meter rock drill hose and a remote control robo which can go and pick up a hose 500 meter and do firefighting. With a thermal imaging camera So the operator at a distance of more than 300 meters can see what the robo is looking at and what the robo is doing, and even register the temperature that it is facing. It has its own water shield. So the robo can do it, or from the robo you can pick up 4 hand lines, and the positive pressure ventilator that you see, the big one is enough to ventilate a whole building standing down. Just at the entry, if you place it about 3 meters distance, or a basement can be ventilated. And the portable ventilator, which is about 50 kilos in weight on wheels, it can be pulled up again. That also has a high pressure mist system. So if you use that, you can ventilate hot air, hot gases, smoke, and your visibility for the firemen improves, and you can do good firefighting and save as many people as possible. Exceptionally useful in industrial fires also, where you can go close, especially textiles. And the robo can go for the hydrocarbon fires and all, and do that job. That is what it's developed basically in-house, and then we got it fabricated.
So give your final statement.
So in Ahmedabad we have done this, and now it is being replicated throughout the state. The only thing I would like, all buildings, maybe small, big, tall or short, factories, they should have their plans approved before, so that the fire department can opine upon what to provide, how much to provide, escape routes to be designed, staircase to be designed, ventilation to be designed, so people can escape before the fire service could respond to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dastur. But I'm sorry we could not see your video, but the efforts you have brought in for displaying how the robo system is working very well in Ahmedabad, and multiply to 200, and also planning to scale up it to all the districts of the state of Gujarat. And your focus was also on ventilation and smoke management, and this planning and building bylaws, and taking clearances from this. Let us hear, we have heard 2 states, especially this one state was Maharashtra, with a very innovative thing which was brought in, and how Gujarat has been able to do and bringing technology as the Maharashtra is doing. And what Mr. Sukanta Kumar Sethi has to say, who is the Chief Fire Officer of Government of Odisha. Part you have heard from Mr. Mohanty, Dr. Mohanty, as a Director General of Fire Services. And now we would be listening to the Chief Fire Officer of from Odisha, who has also been conferred with the President and special award for his very decorated career. So now I can request Mr. Sethi to elaborate upon what Dr. Mohanty has said in the form of that Odisha has been able to say. So can I request Mr. Sethi, please? Sukanta Kumar Sethi, Chief Fire Officer.
Good afternoon, sir.
I would request you kindly build upon what Dr. Mohanty has mentioned.
Sir, can you hear me, sir? Sir, can you hear me, sir?
Please go ahead. Yes, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, sir. Respected Professor Santosh Kumar ji from NIDM, Major General Manoj Kumar, Executive Director NIDM, respected Mr. Pradeep Kumar Jena, Additional Chief Secretary to Government SRC and Managing Director OSDMA, respected Dr. Satyajit Mohanty, DG Fire Service, Home Guards and Civil Defense, and my colleagues, Mr. Rahangadle from Mumbai Fire Service, Mr. Dastur from Ahmedabad Fire Service. Sir, due to rapid urbanization, construction of vertical structure and rapid industrialization, the risk of fire of the cities became multiple. Due to recent fire in Anuj Mandi in New Delhi, coaching center fire in Surat, Korolabag fire, COVID hospital fire Ahmedabad, and a hotel turned COVID care center, that is Swarna at Vijayawada, fire incident and fire in auto LPG tank of a petrol pump in Bhubaneswar. Number of lives have been lost and huge property has also been lost in the different major fire in the country. Every year, 1,000 crores of property have been lost due to fire. More than 56% of a death toll is due to fire. These fire accidents compel us for proper implementation of fire safety measures in the building industries which have the fire risks for fire safety of our citizens. So fire safety is an important subject and it is the needs of the time. Fire safety can be achieved if the building shall be constructed. Fire safety can be achieved if the building shall be constructed with proper planning and designing, adopting all codal provision of a development authority and building code. The fire can stop in the initial stage if a proper passive and active fire protection measure taken up while constructing the building or developing any infrastructure. Fire loss can be reduced by constructing the building with fire resistance material, installation of active and passive fire protection system, proper training and extinction of a fire with the appropriate method. Sir, to achieve the fire safety, the builders or the industrialists or the occupants should strictly adhere the local building codes, other statutory norms, which includes setback, means of escape, means of access, abutting road, etc. All electrical installation must be fitted as per the electrical safety code and proper use of electrical gadgets, because we know that numbers of fire accidents occurred due to electric circuit. Adopting good practices for storage of flammable and combustible materials as per Petroleum Rule, Gas Cylinder Rule 2004, Explosive Substances Act 1908 and other codal provisions. Provisions of required fire protection measure in compliance with the National Building Code 2016, adhering set of practices with a clear intention to reduce the fire loss. Conducting regular training on emergency evacuation and maintenance of a firefighting installation like a hydrant, hose reel hose, detection and alarm system and pump, etc. There is a need of community awareness. There is a need of community awareness on a regular basis to inject the practices in the mind of occupier or employee how to react in case of fire, and also practice the evacuation drill. Most of the owner of the building think that expenditure incurred for the installation of a fire safety measures is a financial burden and try their best to compromise with the safety measures. As an instance, I can say in some buildings, if we ask to install the diesel pumps with the electric pumps, they have come with a request that we have connected our electric pump with the generator DG sets, so and it can be work in case of any emergency and in case of a failure of any electricity. But as per the National Building Code 2016, there is a need of a pump, 2 electric pump and 1 diesel pump with a jockey pump to work during any emergency. Sometimes the builders are not willing to install diesel pumps with electric pumps with a plea that electric pump connected with a DG set which can work during the emergency, though it is mandatory as per the National Building Code. Sir, therefore, it is the high time to create mass awareness to change the mind of the citizens to adopt proper fire protection measure to achieve fire safety to save the life and property of the public. Sir, Odisha Fire Service is a leading fire service. Odisha Fire Service is a leading fire service in the state, in the country. Odisha Fire Service Act was enacted in the year 1992 to provide fire safety in the state. Section 10 of this Act empowered the state government to declare defined fire risky premises. Odisha Fire Prevention and Fire Safety Rule implemented in 2017, which specifies the fire risk premises. Odisha Fire Service issues fire safety recommendation at plan approval stage prior to the commencement of the proposed project. Because after enactment of Fire Prevention and Fire Safety Rule 2017, we have streamlined the issue of fire safety certificate and fire safety recommendation to the builders or the industrialists, those have required the fire safety certificates. On Odisha Fire Service Prevention Rule 2017 empower the authorized officer of the state fire service to enter and inspect the fire risk premises to ascertain adequacy and contravention of fire safety measures. And under this rule, sealing the authorized officer also empowered to sealing of fire unsafe building and initiating prosecution procedure against the owner and occupier. Besides, if required, the authorized officer can suggest the electrical and water supply department to disconnect the water. So by this method, we can achieve the fire safety measures in our state, and we can compel the builders and industrialists to take the necessary fire protection measure for the safety of their buildings or the industries. Sir, all these services, that is issue of a fire safety certificate and a fire safety recommendation, have been issued in online in a time bound period to give the better services to our public. We have our own website, and we have requested all the citizens of the state to apply in online and without any touch point. We have issued the FSR before the project, before the starting of the project, and we have given the fire safety certificate after completion of the project. Sir, in operational infrastructure, Odisha Fire Service having 340 fire stations, we have 314 blocks in Odisha, and almost all the blocks have been covered up with a fire station with a aim to reduce the response time to attend the fire with a minimum period. Sir, we have more than 1,000 vehicle fleet and 600 pumps to utilize in case of any fire. Sir, Odisha Fire Service not only confined with the firefighting, but also we have all the fire service persons are trained to act in the during any emergency or during any natural calamities or man-made disaster. Sir, almost all fire service personnel are trained to handle the power surge, power boats, and other equipment, all disaster equipments, that is cutting gear and lifting gear. Odisha State Relief Commissioner as SRC has provided the funds to strengthen the fire service to provide the disaster management equipment. Sir, now that is we have also 3 training center because we have to develop the capacity of our personnel. So we have 3 training academy, one at Odisha Fire Disaster Response Academy at Bhubaneswar, one at Odisha Fire Disaster Response Institute at Naraj Katak, and one at Oswali, that is a water related training center at Ramchandi, Puri. Sir, we trained our people as well as we trained our staff, employees, as well as the employees of Nagaland and other states on firefighting as well as on disaster management. We have developed our personnel to work during any disaster, and they are all trained to work with all type of disaster management equipment.
So, sir, what is your recommendation? Finally?
Sir, actually, sir, problem is that, sir, it is difficult to inspect all the buildings by the employees, though we have more than 5,600 employees, but it is a difficult task for us. So we can recommend that we should have a panel like the we should have a list of we should have a panel to inspect the third party audit system or like this to inspect the buildings and to create the awareness among the public, because there is a as per the fire prevention and fire safety rule 2017, though all the buildings, particularly the specified buildings who is risk of fire is require the fire safety certificate, but due to lack of knowledge, due to lack of awareness, people are not willing to take the to adopt the fire safety certificate, to take the fire safety certificate and adopt the fire safety measures. So it requires the awareness among the public. Besides, there should be a third-party audit system. There should be a panel. Those can be inspect the building. Those can insist the public for giving the to make them aware to get the certificates and to make these fire safety complaints of their building. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sethi, for bringing this on the floor. And panelists recommended that we should be having a kind of a public engagement other than what they have been doing and strengthening the entire machinery in terms of governance. We need to look at that how these things would work and how community can be. Anup also mentioned about 5 years about that, and this engagement of community in terms of taking this agenda forward. We have Mr. Vijayan here, beyond Carton, and he's working in Bangalore. So after listening to all these presentations, and all have recommended what you would be in terms of taking community engagement, whether community engagement should be taken by the enforcement of law, or by taking making as a punishment, or also incentivizing this initiative taken by the community.
I have to add
what
something.
Kind of a proposition? Yeah, please.
Kumar, with your permission, can I have a small introduction?
Dr. Mohanty, yeah, please add on.
I'm very keen also to listen to Mr. Uday Vijayan, but small intervention here. What our CFO was presenting regarding this third-party audit, fine. But I have noticed another major, I would say, gap in the system. What is that gap? Many of these occupiers of fire risk buildings, they are not aware of the provisions of the law. For example, National Building Code or other things. So there is a gap here to give some kind of a expert, I would say, opinion or maybe consultancy, if I use the word, in advising these people that this is a fire risk building as per the respective state acts. But these are the requirements as per the National Building Code or Explosive Act or Chemical Substance Act. There are so many acts, and there are so many recommendations also. And these recommendations vary also. The building code is 2016, it was amended. Last 2006, maybe amended in 2020. People are not aware, occupiers are not aware. So there is a gap here throughout the country, probably as far as consultancy is concerned. So I would suggest that there should be some kind of institutional arrangement in the states about which can with whom they can register. I can give one analogy. For example, in the last about a decade, the private security has come up in a big way in all the states. Many states have their rules, resolutions, even acts. Andhra Pradesh has an act. So there is a registration authority. For example, in Odisha, security service will register with the Home Department, but one NOC has to be got from the police or whatever. There is some kind of a rule. So fire safety consultancy should also be institutionalized, statewide, and there should be some kind of a rule so that there is a body which is regulating it, and which is a body with whom they have to be registered, so that they're genuine, team of consultants. And this will go a long way because people are asking us. In fact, I have changed the entire website, frequently asked question 3 or 4 pages for people to know what they're supposed to do as per the law. Very simple words. But even then, they would like to know further, because fire safety recommendation, I see this online in Odisha, there are about 45 requirements. He has to download, he has to fill it up, the authorized officer has to go. People are not, I'm occupied, I'm ready to give everything, I'm ready to install everything, but there is no consultancy. So that is one suggestion from my side.
Thank you very much for giving this and bringing it and other awareness, lack of awareness amongst various stakeholders about different provisions of law and the framework, and we can bring into the recommendations that how we can go ahead. So Uday Vijayan would like to highlight that one side we are talking about that people are not aware, and or the agencies are not aware, and also that community, when we are talking about engagement of community in the entire process of fire risk management as a preventive mode. I would like to listen your experience. Everybody would like to listen. Although I'm my sincere apology to all the audiences because we have exceeded the time, because it was so interesting and so pragmatic. So we could not thought of stopping these resource persons because we hardly get time from them. So Mr. Uday Vijayan, I would request you to please share your very important experience to the entire people.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much, Mr. Santosh Kumar. It's indeed a privilege to be participating here in this webinar because I do not belong to your community. I am not professionally qualified. I happen to have come into fire safety by sheer accident, and pun intended. Some of you may remember a fire in Bangalore in 2010 where there was a Carlton Towers incident where we lost nine people. One of them was my son who passed away in that fire accident. And it is since then that I set up Beyond Carlton with the whole aim that we try and make sure that more people get a little aware about fire safety. So we've been around for 10 years, and I titled my presentation as The Other View, because I just thought I should share a view both over the last 10 years as well as a citizen's perspective. So far, we've heard people who've been in the industry, people who are part of the fire services, part of disaster management. But maybe if you can spare a few minutes and listen to our side of the story, which is really how do we engage with citizens too. So coming in late, what it does is it doesn't allow you to, 1 minute, I'm just trying to flip. Yeah. So I'm going to run through these statistics because everybody has quoted it. Coming in late, you have the advantage of not wasting time on some of the numbers. But something that I came across was, heat-related accidents, which include fire, heat, and hot substances like oils, cause about 9 million injuries and more than 120,000 deaths, 120,000 deaths across the world. And guess what? India ranks #1 in heat-related deaths too. And this was something that I came across, which I thought may be worthwhile looking at. The India view, which is really NCRB data, which I think all of us have spoken about so far. We've heard all the experts so far talk about it. We lose about 30 Indians every day in a fire, as per the latest statistics. 51% of the fire deaths come from just 5 states: Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Odisha, Chhattisgarh, and my own state of Karnataka. We've lost about 2,000 odd people in cooking gas bursts, and about 1,990 due to electrical short circuits. So cooking gas bursts, as per the 2019 NCRB, seems to be a big issue that we need to be focusing on. So what is our view? What is ailing us as a country, as a society when it comes to fire safety? My view is that there are lots of reasons that have been touched upon so far, but some which maybe I can elaborate on. We heard other speakers today talking about rapid urbanization and poor safety planning. The question that keeps bothering me very often is, we have new cities, we have growth of cities, we make sure that we have water and electricity when a new layout comes up, but we never plan for a fire station to come in the vicinity. So I've been working in with the Karnataka government, trying to tell them, when you set up a new area, new layout, please make sure that safety standards are met. I don't know if the smart city projects take care of some of these, but traditionally, we've never looked at fire safety as a must-have utility that needs to be provided to citizens. We heard from various fire chiefs earlier today about challenges that fire departments face, both in terms of infrastructure, be it in terms of equipment, be it in terms of manpower, be it in terms of training. And we work very closely, Beyond Carlton works very closely with the fire services of Karnataka. So I do have insights about some of their challenges. The other bit, from a citizen's perspective, that we have observed and being involved with fire safety is there's extremely poor coordination between civic bodies, between municipalities in some cities and some parts of the country. The fire departments come under municipalities. In Karnataka, it comes under the home department. But even then, the municipality is the one that goes out and gives a final sanction for a building to be occupied and doesn't work in very closely with the fire departments in many cities and states. Electricity entities, those who provide distribution of power, very often don't work very closely with the fire services, and therefore there are challenges with short circuits that we spoke about. There is poor coordination unless we've noticed the fire chief is also from the fire services, from the police forces, very poor coordination with the police department. I'll give you an example. 10 years ago, when the Carlton Towers fire happened in Bangalore, it took fire engines to reach the building over 1 hour because the traffic was blocked. And there was no coordination between the fire department and the local traffic police. There is always good that happens out of bad. Now the fire department and the traffic police works in great conjunction together. So the moment they actually have fire personnel sitting in the police controlled rooms in case of an emergency. So chances are many states who are on this call are already following that. But that's a lesson we learned from Carlton. Coming to the last bit, and that's where we Indians don't believe we'll ever die in a fire. That's very, very obvious. We first of all don't believe we'll die in an accident. So why do you see a person wearing on a motorcycle, not wearing his helmet, but having the helmet on his shoulder? It's because there's sheer apathy, and that goes even into fire safety. COVID, for example, is a classic example of how we don't take our own lives seriously. Actually, you will find people and the government up to a point can help us as citizens, but beyond a point, I think it's the duty of all of us to take care of our own selves and our families. I, in fact, have just in the last couple of months written an article with a professor at IIM Bangalore around this whole bit about why we Indians behave the way we do when it comes to our own safety. So if any of you would like to take a look at that article, I'd be more than willing to share it with you. But there is a behavioral issue among citizens around safety and our own safety. So that leads you on to low awareness. Because you believe you'll never be in a fire, I don't want to listen to anything about what to do in case of a fire accident or if I'm caught in a fire. We, Beyond Carlton, run, as Anup Karanth had just mentioned earlier, a very focused awareness campaign on social media. And I'm glad to share with you that we now have a lot of interaction both across the country and from participants across the world. So that has been a great learning for us about citizen engagement that we talked about. What is our view, having spent time in fire safety and around from a citizen's perspective? we believe there's a need for a comprehensive review and forward planning by cities for fire safety preparedness. And that's where we made a few steps in Karnataka with the local fire and emergency services. I will give you a quick peek into what we created. It's a first of its kind in India, a 5-year fire safety blueprint that Beyond Carlton created in partnership with the Karnataka Fire and Emergency Services. So we didn't do it sitting alone. It took us a year to prepare this along with the fire services of Karnataka. Just a quick peek, the fire department shared with us some data which talked about for a 5-year period between 2011 and 2016, we had in Bangalore 29 deaths, we had 251 injured, and a property loss of about 269 crores. That was data that they provided us. And then we said, okay, let's start setting up some goals. And we said, let us look at various areas. And we said the approach should be, how can we introduce or look at compliance? One is to ensure compliance. Laws exist, but compliance, as all of us will agree, is a huge challenge. Some of the laws are very dated. I'll give you one more example from Carlton. When the Carlton Towers incident happened, the local fire and emergency services in Karnataka didn't have authority prior to Carlton Towers to go into a high-rise building and check for fire safety violations. And that shocked me as a parent who had lost a son as to why didn't you prevent a fire? And that's really when we filed a PIL in the High Court and changed the state laws. And now the fire department is empowered. I'm just hoping all states and all fire departments have that power, because unless the fire departments have the power, a municipal corporation can't go and certify for fire safety regulations. Obviously, we have to look at fire and emergency capabilities. There are huge issues around that. And we took a third thing in our approach about engaging with all stakeholders. I talked a little about it. Currently, all stakeholders tend to work in isolation. And lastly, how do we enhance awareness and participation? Our goal over a 5-year term is ambitious, but we said we should have an ambitious target. And we said we should look at a 0 fire death in Bengaluru and look at 50% at least reduction in injuries and property loss. So very quickly, just to share with you our approach, we said these are all the stakeholders. There is the local authorities, which is the Bangalore Development Authority and the municipal corporation. There's NDRF, the private enterprises, the builders. Medical aid becomes a critical element during accidents. Of course, the fire services and the electricity department, which is BESCOM in Bangalore. And last but not least, the public at large. The way we went about it is we set some guidelines. We said it should be a forward-looking document. It should be consultative, meaning we should be able to talk to all these people. We should be in a space where we can collaborate. We should look at solutions, and all solutions should be practical in nature. And you can see these were some of the guidelines we set for ourselves. This is a brief overview. You can download this from our website. It's available to everybody. So we set out some goals. We looked at capacity building. We looked at regulation and compliance. We looked at awareness creation. And last but not least, at the bottom is really key milestones we wanted to achieve year by year. And we've set we are in progress and we're in motion right now on each of these areas. We do monthly meetings with the fire department to review where we are. Yes, some spaces we have not been able to achieve large traction, but we are hoping that slowly we will be able to make a change. So I have an offer to make as Beyond Carlton. We'd love to create similar blueprints across the country. If any of you are interested, we can work in with you, help guide you, advise you from our learnings from Bangalore, and help you create 5-year blueprints for your cities. So I wouldn't waste much time. I think we're already late for lunch. And I once again want to thank each of you for having given me an opportunity as a citizen to share a different perspective and a different view. So I hope I've stayed within your 15-minute timeline, Mr. Santosh Kumar, but thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Great to listen to you. Thank you very much, first of all, about this sudden tragedy. Now it's leading to a kind of saving lives kind of a mission of yours. So I must compliment you the way you have taken initiative in Bangalore, and you are offering your services to the other fire services, this department of the state. Very nicely elaborated that how pragmatic the other views could be. And I could take out the 5 major points. One is this compliance, then the cooperation, then the capacity, and then we are saying about in terms of coherence and taking people making people responsible, citizens' responsibility for reducing their own risk. And these are the kind of a basics for the framework which were designed for risk reduction for the fire. And it's a brilliant point which you have brought in. I don't know, time has already up, but I'm really thankful to you that you're bringing these kind of information. Let me see that if I have any burning question so that we can have last reaction from each of the panelists in the question if participants have raised. Any participants would like to have any question? So far, I don't see any question in the whole this scenario probably. But anyway, what I would suggest in this way that how we can go from here. And I would like to take, all have listened to every presentation. So Uday Vijayan, I would just start from yours only, that your final point, other than what you have said, and you have listened to all the presentations. So I would have a last final point before I request for the closing remarks from each of the panelists that after listening to you, what are your key final take points for this from here to where? Mr. Vijayan.
Yeah, thank you for having me answer this. But at the cost of repetition, I would just say that I think it's extremely important for fire services to engage with citizens, but more importantly, get them to collaborate with you. Try and get all stakeholders on the same table, which is challenging most often than not. And some of you may not call it a blueprint, you may have other plans, but it's important to have a vision for each fire services, and which is where I offered saying that if you would like us to support you in any way, we'd be more than glad to help partner with any fire department across this country. So that's really what I would say.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vijayan. Can I hear from Maharashtra? Anything which you would like to mention, Mr. Prabhat? Are you there, Mr. Prabhat?
Mr. There.
Mr. Dastoor, Mr. Dastoor, are you there?
Yes.
Yeah, can you repeat your point, Mr. Dastoor?
Audible.
Yes, please go ahead.
Suggested I would like to make a short video and send it on a pen drive or something to the NIDM system and pressure ventilators that we work with.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Dastoor. Mr. Sethi from Odisha Fire Service, would you like to say any punchline, last point from your side? No point. Mr. Anup?
Yes, Professor Santosh Kumar, just one point here. I think, we are fairly well advanced in terms of, understanding on the SAM. I think we have done phenomenal work around it. We do have institutions and we do have, large number of establishments, who are very well versed with, what needs to be done on the codes, etc. I think what is missing, and I think what I echo what Uday said, we need to bring community to the focus. And my only suggestion is that all the SDMAs and the fire and emergency services should come in together to start a massive program around, involving community in fire safety. That's all from my side.
Thank you very much, Mr. Anup Karant from the World Bank. Now, Mr. Dr. Mohanty, would you like to give a final point from your side as an underlying point?
Yeah, I by and large agree. Whatever has been told by all the panelists, community engagement, how to mitigate these risks, interagency coordination by Mr. Bijan. To some extent, it is there part of the statute in Odisha, but there is gap also. But my, again, I'll repeat the same what I suggested a while ago. We need to encourage consultancy groups. They can, this consultancy they cannot give free also. They can charge some fees, etc., nominal fees, but that should comprise, ex-fire service officers, those who have worked in the field, and they can give the consultancy to the occupiers, owners who are in fact at dark at this moment. Many of them do not know, unless of course somebody goes and asks that it is, fire risk building and you have violated something, and then he comes to me. So there is a need in the entire country probably to institutionalize the consultancy.
Thank you very much, Dr. Satyajit Mohanty. Now we'll come back to Mr. Jena. You had given your keynote address that prevention is better than cure, and risk management should be brought into the main fire management instead of just focusing on response. What you have to say at this moment, Mr. Jena, as a remark when you are concluding this?
So let me say that this particular session has been personally to me has been so enriching. There is a need to modernize fire services, but at the same time, fire services need to work with community, and what Joel said, it is so important that we need to work with communities, understand communities, and take their views, and then only things will improve. And that is why, though Odisha is one of the lead states in developing village disaster management plans and city disaster management plans, in our scheme of things, fire has never been permanently addressed. Now it gives me an opportunity to relook at the entire approach, and certainly I would like to disturb Mr. Vijay shortly and maybe little frequently, take his help, take his guidance. And I know, because I have worked with Dr. Satyajit Mohanty, anyway, he's my senior, just like my brother. And together we want to really do something very sincerely to improve the fire safety situation in the state. So I would like to take help of all the panelists and take the guidance of Mr. Vijay to improve the situation in the state. And not only that, one is urban area, even in rural setting also there is a need, because a lot of new houses are coming up. So unless we work with the communities and make them aware and make them partners in the entire system, possibly these new houses that we build will also be prone to fire hazards. So how do we prevent fire hazards in new constructions? That is also another area we would like to work, and I sincerely thank all of them. It's a great learning to OSDMA for OSDMA, and we in OSDMA will certainly take all these good ideas and prepare our plan of action for next 3 years.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jena. It's a very, very kind of enriching for us as well to take this, that any output or suggestions which have come up today, the government is willing to take forward as a kind of a. I would request now Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal to say a few words at this closing point. Listening to all this, may I request now General Bindal to kindly address, please, at this moment?
Sir, he had to leave for a meeting. So.
Oh, acha, he's not there. Okay. So thank you very much. I would just give this an insight that what we have gathered quickly, and then request Mr. Mishra to give the vote of thanks. in an entire course of discussion and learning from all the distinguished panelists, what we have got that one is this exposure of risk is 24/7 in the fire. And we, for addressing these issues, that prevention is much more needed, and we need to prepare differently than what we have been doing it before. And here that we got this as a population density is much more needed to be looked into, just rather than just focusing on a kind of a very conventional measurement. And the new urbanization process is to be brought into this, whether the smart cities and other are following it up. Fourth is this, that how fire preparedness and population, density gaps, which have been highlighted that everywhere 94%, 97%, 96% gap, how these gaps can be actually be filled in, whether the human resource or the technology in the different stages of time, but we need to plan for that. So emphasis is on the planning and the capacity building process. So this particular framework, when we are talking about risk management, this capacity building framework has to be addressed on the community and also the fire governance itself, where the different kind of players are operating, whether we talk about this local self-government and to the fire department or civil defense and other departments. And we see this experiences from 5 E's practices of the community engagement. And all the fire responders now, time has come that they are getting engaged into different kind of disaster responses at the time of COVID, and also that they have to address the other disaster, including the fire. So it's just not the fire for them. So now the new challenges. So we need to revisit the entire framework of the and the regulations to be looked into, like everyone highlighted about the building bylaws, that urban enforcement of bylaws. So how we are going to go, and the third party audit and the escalating or maybe the encouraging the consultancy group to professionally to the government, and how that can be brought into. And another thing which has been brought into the electrical gadgets and other thing, the smaller minuscule work which they have, the mechanics which they do and they ignore the safety measures, have to be brought in. And what the Carlton also mentioned about that beyond Carlton is Mr. Vijayan that said that that was very shocking in the kind of that fire department is not empowered to go and inspect the building. And in many of the occasions also it has been identified that whether we are more power to the fire department will lead to a more kind of a bureaucracy. That also has to be looked into, that how with the community engagement that can be brought as a possible kind of a transparent manner of community, which we say that 5 C's, this which we say in terms of compliance, capacity, collaboration, capacity building, and awareness to action. Many people might be aware but not be taking action. So we need to revisit, review our plan, and also go with the kind of in the new system and new challenges which have been highlighted by all the different states, with the insurgence of technology, how those technology can also be brought in saving the fire responders and also the citizens. So these were the larger kind of deliberations happened and brought in terms of many points we have captured, but just few points I thought I must bring as a kind of a summary of the day. And now I thank and extend my heartfelt thanks to all the distinguished panelists, Mr. Jena, General Bindal, Dr. Mohanty, Mr. Vijayan, Mr. Dastur, Mr. Prabhat, to all of you that you have been, and all the distinguished delegates who have joined and listened to the presentation. And Anup, my special thank to you that you have been bringing all these smaller issues as a very, very important issues in terms of addressing this fire system. My thanks to Mr. Lochan also, Mr. General Bindal, who is not here, but on his heartfelt thanks, and my team, Dr. Anuradha Maurya, and entire IT team who has been helping. My special thank to you, Dr. Anuradha, for making it happen and as a very successful program. And now I request Mr. Lochan to kindly give the formal vote of thanks, if at all needed. I think. Thank you very much from NIDM.
Good afternoon. On behalf of Odisha State Disaster Management Authority, the entire disaster management community in Odisha and across the country, and all other think tanks available who actually extend their support to disaster management. I extend a warm vote of thanks to all the participants, panelists, as well as to hold this very valuable meeting. My special thanks to Professor Santosh Kumar for going ahead with the organizing this program, extending the full cooperation on behalf of National Institute of Disaster Management. So my profound thanks to Professor Santosh Kumar ji. My thanks to Major General Manoj Kumar Bendal, being the head of NIDM, to be actually a national institute to extend their support to a state organization like OSDMA. My profound thanks to Major General Manoj Bendal. I extend my thanks to my boss, my mentor, and the disaster management mentor to say, Sri Pradeep Kumar Jena, who is now the Additional Chief Secretary and also the Managing Director of OSDMA. I prefer to call him the MD OSDMA because that makes the disaster preparedness.
So he's a Mr. Lochar, my special thanks to him also from our side. To Mr. Jena, he's a very, very energetic officer I have found, taking the proactive engagement. Thank you, Mr. Jena.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
And when it was his vision, Kamal, go ahead with organizing this with an idea. Be in the mainstream of be in the national mainstream. Be a part of an IDM process of educating the country. So that was his idea. His next idea was listen to the others. There are experts available like Mr. Vijay, Mr. Dastur, Mr. Rangdale. So why don't you listen to them? So it was his vision, his advice, his hope. And despite his personal tragedy, let me take the opportunity and his permission to intimate the community that Sri Pradeep Jena lost his father 3 days before.
Oh.
So he, at the age of 83, and despite his greatest loss, he's still with us, giving time, advice, guidance. And I feel sorry sometimes when I see him, because he takes at least 1 meal a day as per the rituals, and still he is there to help us.
My deep condolence to Dr. Jena to your family. Our condolences to you.
So
we are very sorry to hear that.
My profoundest thanks to Sri Pradeep Jena, not because he is the Additional Chief Secretary and Managing Director, but being a very good man and very good disaster manager. I extend my profound thanks to Sri Satyadev Mohanty, who has been a friend, philosopher, guide to all of us. He is being the Director General of Police, Fire Service, and Director General of Fire Service, Home Guards, and Civil Defense. He has been a mentor. So thank you, sir, for giving your time. My profound thanks to all the panelists. Sri Anup Karan, who is a good old friend of mine, who has actually advised and given me assistance to invite the resource persons to identify them and to be in touch with them. So thanks to you, Anup, for my side. My thanks to...
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anupji. Prabhat Rangdale, he has been cooperating with us like anything. Mr. Dastur, my profound thanks to you. We will be preferring to learn from you more, and if possible, with the permission of MDOSDMA, we will be visiting your state to look at the things you have done.
With Maharashtra
and Karnataka. My best and most profound thanks to Mr. Vijay. He has converted a personal tragedy into a life-saving mission of life. We are proud of you, Mr. Vijay. We are proud of your effort, and we are proud of your commitment to save lives. We will be learning from you, and I just Managing Director OSDMA was telling me, so Kamal, why don't you invite Mr. Vijayan for a knowledge hub lecture series? We are thinking towards that, and we'll seek your time and cooperation to provide your knowledge more to us so that we can have a better disaster management and fire safety system. So, on behalf of I also extend my thanks to Mr. Sethi. He is a good old friend of mine. We have been working since long. So my profound thanks to you for being a part of this. I extend my profound thanks to my colleagues in OSDMA, our technical experts, Mr. Meghnad, who has been trying a lot to organize this program, the state project officers, Dr. Anuradha from NIDM, who has been helping us in technical aspects of the webinar. So on behalf of OSDM, I extend a full thanks to all of these personnel who have been very helpful. Of NIDM also, NIDM, OSDMA, my profound thanks to you. Thank you very much.
With this, we close?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Professor Santosh Kumar, we can close with your permission.
Yeah, Anuradha, Dr. Anuradha, can you close this now? Thank you once again, and my deepest condolences to Dr. Jena for this great loss.
Thank you.